We're talking about toxic precipitation that kills soil microbiome, kills root systems. So even though they can sensationalize these events and pretend that the drought's over and everything's fine, the truth is anything but that. What we're hoping is that people from all sides of this discussion understand that if we don't stop climate engineering, we're done, and that there's no legitimate discussion about climate anything without addressing climate engineering, aka weather warfare, first and foremost. In regard to what's happening,
friends, the US dollar has lost 85% of its value since the 70s when the dollar decoupled from gold. And the government seems bent on continuing the tradition. This means one thing: the security of your future and your family's future is all in your hands. Make sure you freeze the value of the wealth you're holding today. Invest in gold with Noble Gold Investments, as gold is proven to withstand recession, inflation, and just about all economic threats. Noble Gold Investments is here to help you if you want to invest in gold. You will also get a 24-karat quarter-ounce gold standard coin for free. Go to noblegoldinvestments.com now. noblegoldinvestments.com, the only gold company I trust. Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers, it's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in to another Inspired Conversation. Now, today's guest has been with us twice before on the Inspired channel, and you might know him from his tireless and extensive work in the field of uncovering geoengineering, weather manipulation, if you will, but also shining a light on the huge monumental problem that we as humans have created on Earth today. Now, I encourage you to really open your mind and keep your biases at the door today, because we're going to go into the depths of the deception and the truth. And for that, we all need to be open-minded and really use critical thinking. Now, without further ado, welcome with me, Dane Wigington from GeoEngineeringWatch.org. Dane, thank you so much for joining us again today.
thank you, John. Thank you, and to all your followers that are certainly doing their best, I'm sure, to try to course correct for what the current trajectory that the human race is on. And it's a battle that will take all of us, certainly.
Well, it's also a battle, Dane, that is happening on so many levels that sometimes it seems overwhelming, but nonetheless, we have to walk that path. You certainly have been walking that path for a very, very long time. We just talked off camera. You told me about a project you've been involved in the early 80s. So you are definitely a marathon runner in this fight, if you will. And then you said off camera to me, it's been a few months since we last spoke, but so much has transpired. What are you observing, weather climate-wise, on Earth today? All the phenomena that we're seeing in various countries and continents, many people feel this is not natural anymore. What do you see? What do you say?
It's certainly anything but natural. And any form of human activity that affects the energy balance of the planet and thus ecosystems is a part of the problem, with the climate intervention operations being the most singly destructive of all, on top of everything else. But again, it's not a this or that equation, it's a this and that. What we're seeing is a cascading collapse scenario, and that's unfolding now, and that is a very nonlinear equation. So once you have dominoes that start to fall, if you can picture this metaphorically, each domino knocks over a bigger domino, and which knocks over an even bigger domino. And so it's very nonlinear. And we're seeing fisheries collapse, crops collapse. We're seeing what's left of Earth's forests that are still alive, incinerating. And climate engineering is inseparable from all of this. And again, it doesn't negate all the other forms of human damage to the planet, and there are many, but it simply means that climate engineering is disabling the planet's ability to respond to the damage done from other forms of human activity. So we would consider it the singly most destructive of all, but not the only factor in the equation. But if we could stop this factor and allow the planet to respond on its own, John, it would be a quantum leap in the right direction.
Dane, a little later in the conversation, we want to really dissect the climate debate and talk about myths and talk about realities. But now we are seeing a summer of extreme fires, right? We're down in Tennessee, and supposedly we've gotten a lot of smoke that came from Canada, which is a huge distance, right? You live in California. You've seen the snowmageddon of 2023. What are these things that we're observing? Is this weather? Is somebody pushing buttons? What is really going on?
This definitely is not anything that can be considered natural or cyclical. So in regard to the U.S. West Coast, let me start there first, and I'll get to Canadian fires after. But what we have is we had the scheduled weather as we started the winter of 2022-2023 was scheduled to be more of the same, more protracted drought, more cutting off the precipitation, because the winter of 2021-2022, where I live on the east side of Lake Shasta, we literally had zero precipitation for the entire winter. From the end of December to the start of April, we had nothing. And that's in a region over that period where we should have received 50 plus inches of rain. We got nothing. Same was scheduled for this last winter, but someone changed the schedule. Someone changed the script, and we got the quote snowmageddon scenario of chemically nucleated snow. And I'm not guessing. We can hear these aircraft outside when these events are ongoing. Snow often starts at 40 or 45 degrees. The temperatures of the surface begin to lower because this chemically nucleating element, and we're testing the precipitation, so we're not guessing. It creates a very cold to the touch material, much like dry ice. Again, that's a material that is unnaturally nucleated as well. So it did immense amount of damage to the already dead and dying forest. And did all this water revive the forest? No, it can't. We're talking about toxic precipitation that kills soil microbiome, kills root systems. So even though they can sensationalize these events and pretend that the drought's over and everything's fine, the truth is anything but that. So we're seeing the fir trees, the predominant trees in the forest, dying even faster now after this snowmageddon winter. And that's what media won't talk about, official agencies won't acknowledge. So now let's transition to the fires, because the same thing is happening all over Canada, Siberia, and countless other locations around the globe. So we still have dead and dying forests. We have toxified soils, dead soil microbiome, root systems that are dying, trees that are dying. And that sets the template for climate engineering or for the fires, because of climate engineering, I should say, to incinerate forest. And why would the climate engineers want to incinerate forest? Because it's a last-ditch desperate effort to mask some of the runaway thermal energy buildup on the planet, much of it accelerated by climate engineering. But in their mentality, their form of thinking, like the pharmaceutical industrial complex, to mask the symptom while using weather as a weapon the entire time and trying to obscure from public view the severity of damage being done to the planet. So climate engineering in regard to the fires, again, killing the trees from the roots up, killing the trees from the top down, because climate engineering is destroying the ozone layer, John. John, do you notice how intense the sun feels on your skin, on your car surface, inside your car? Have you noticed that?
We talked about this. As a matter of fact, Dane, I'm no stranger to heat. I've spent a lot of time in southern countries. The way the heat feels this summer is almost indescribable. It's such a stuffy. It's like you're trapped in a sauna. That's how it really feels like. It's very, very intense and very, very tiring, by the way. A lot of people say this. So yeah, we feel the intensity.
So that's killing forest foliage from the top down. We have all these particulates being dispersed by jet aircraft. These are electrically conductive particulates, which tends to build up more static energy in the atmosphere, which creates more dry lightning. They're desiccant particles. We know aluminum's a desiccant, which absorbs atmospheric relative humidity. So we end up with much more dry lightning. And these particulates are incendiaries. It's an incendiary dust that's coating forest foliage, the forest floor. So from every conceivable direction, without question, climate engineering is setting the template for these fires to burn with such ferocity. And as of Monday of this week, there were 560 uncontained wildfires in Canada. Siberia is in a similar condition. We have Greece burning. We have Italy burning. There's countries all over that are in flames right now. Other countries in the southern hemisphere that have incinerated in years past, like Australia, now they're undergoing the flash freeze snowmageddon in places there too, which again confuses the population as to the true damage done. If you can create a sensationalized headline of unusual cold or snow, like John, you've seen these headlines of snow in parts of the Middle East or Egypt for the first time ever. You've seen those kind of headlines, correct?
Of course, yeah.
And that really sways people's opinion. They think, well, how could how could there be a thermal energy buildup on the planet if this snow is occurring on the pyramids, for example? And that's exactly the kind of sensationalized headlines they want, but that's not a natural frozen material event. We have the Chinese scientists admitting that they were creating artificial snowstorms over China. Your listeners can look this up. I would encourage them to do so. We had Popular Science cover it, Fox News, MSNBC, everyone covered it. But if you mention it here in the US, suddenly you're instantly marginalized because they don't want the population to wake up to the fact that the entire climate system is being completely manipulated. And now it's unraveling on top of that. So now we have a truly devastating scenario, Jean. It's a cascading collapse scenario. And I would argue on the current course, our timeline will be very, very limited, very short.
The interesting thing that we're seeing in this acceleration is, for example, you now have this administration, it's hard to call it that, but this administration coming out and basically openly talking about dimming the sun, right? Things you talked about for decades, things we all knew. We watched the chemtrails, we watched it happen, but we were all called conspiracy theorists and tinfoil heads and whatnot. Wear your tinfoil hat. Now it's openly discussed. Of course, when it's openly discussed, it only means we've already been doing it for a very long time. It's also come out that apparently meteorologists and many other people in the news media and other fields have been told there is a gag order on any kind of weather manipulation when there was no such gag order. So that's coming out too. It was all very, very elaborate. Now, I want to unpack something with you, Dane, because you, to the best of my knowledge, are the only person who is approaching this problem with your unique perspective. There's either the people that are saying, and this is predominantly the uniparty in the United States, and especially leaning to the left, the Democrat Party, predominantly there is man-made climate change. It's very horrible. We have created this. So the solutions they are presenting is higher taxation, is electric cars, is paper straws, and a lot of these Green New Deal things that seem to be not doing anything at all, just creating a completely new system. Then you go over and look at the political right, which is going through an awakening on many levels, but the political right is saying, or a lot of people in the truth movement are saying, all that they're presenting in terms of science is flawed. It's not right. They're misrepresenting it. It's not CO2. That's not the problem. So really, they're just exaggerating to put a control system on humanity. So here we have a problem with one group that doesn't seem to grasp what the real problem is, and the other group that thinks there is no problem, when really we do have a huge problem. Your unique perspective is climate engineering and weather engineering is not there to create all this havoc. It's there to mask the much worse problems or more horrific problems that we already had before. Can you unpack this for us and for our viewers and what the pitfalls are in this discussion?
Let me back up to the beginning on that. And again, you touched on many very important points. First, in regard to, there's a group that has just announced that there was never any gag order. That's not true. What this group misconstrued was that gag order was specifically about climate engineering. No one has ever made that claim that I know of. We certainly haven't at GeoEngineering Watch. The gag order for National Weather Service and NOAA is about all the agencies' internal operations. And that's important to understand that delineation. So it's when they specifically asked for a gag order on climate engineering alone, again, that was a mistake. And now they're painting a picture there was never a gag order. That's not true. So we hope people like this group that is making these claims that in a sense undermine the cause itself, we hope that they do their homework a bit more thoroughly next time. But bottom line is, in regard to all sides of this equation, you correctly laid out that no one's really looking through a clear lens. They're looking in opposite directions, coming to very opposing conclusions, both of which are wrong. So the bottom line is, yes, we've been very, very bad stewards of the planet. I don't think there's any rationally denying that. There's so many stories that surface all the time, even places where I've spent years in solitude, Jean, like the Channel Islands, which were thought to be a pristine marine sanctuary off the California coast. And now we know that our government was looking the other way while 500,000 barrels 500,000 of DDT were dumped right off the coast of the LA harbors and ports. I saw one of these barges dumping at early morning hours in the late 80s. I mean, that's the kind of mentality the human race has had. Just dump it somewhere. I mean, how many people go to a landfill, a quote landfill, where all their trash goes and they think it magically disappears? We're filling up places all over the globe with mountains and mountains of trash. And again, this is the human mentality. But when you put climate engineering on top of that, that has derailed the planet's life support systems, now we have an even worse equation. So what we're hoping is that people from all sides of this discussion understand that if we don't stop climate engineering, we're done, and that there's no legitimate discussion about climate anything without addressing climate engineering, aka weather warfare, first and foremost. In regard to what's happening, yes, they are trying to mask the severity of it by engineering winter weather events. And John, you might remember all the way back almost 10 years ago, 2014, we had all the headlines about Boston snow and the record Boston snow. And we see that now with Erie, Pennsylvania, and these small locations where they'll take these sensationalized photographs. They did it in California this year, of photographs in Tahoe and places where there were cabins literally buried in snow, right? We see that. What they don't show us, for example, in 2014 during the Boston Snowmageddon events, 14,000 feet up in the Sierras in the middle of winter, there was nothing. There was no snow in places, and people don't see that. So they think whatever's outside their doorstep or whatever sensationalized headline they see, that must be the state of the whole world, and that's not true. So let's look at the biggest military in the world, U.S. military, which is bigger than the next 10 biggest militaries combined. U.S. military has more aerial tankers that are used in climate engineering operations. The U.S. military has 3 times more tankers than all other militaries in the world combined. So it would make sense that that country and that military would be the most effective at keeping their populations cooled down and confused in regard to the true state of the climate. So what do we look at when we see a departure from normal high temperature map that covers the last 10 years? The most anomalously less warm region overall in the entire world has been the eastern half of the US lower 48. And that's less than 1% of the Earth's total surface area. That's not indicative of the whole planet. But for the people that live in those areas where they still have enough moisture, where they have these off and on cold snaps, and you've seen that, John, right? The weather whiplash scenarios. It's in Denver, Colorado, 85-degree record temperatures one day and single-digit snow the next. That's not nature. But again, there are so many layers to this, all of them devastating for us, our health, the environment, what's left of the planet's remaining life support systems. And that's why we're focused on this at geoengineeringwatch.org, John, because of all the causes and concerns we have, if we don't deal with this one, nothing else will matter soon.
Dane, do you think that these people that play God, right? They literally play God. They go and they use the chemicals, the technologies, frequency, you name it, they use it. Do you think they lost control and they're just, it's kind of like, like you said before, you take a pill and that pill might help with one thing, but it causes 13 side effects. Now you need another pill to mask the side effects or deal with that. Do you think what they're doing is just one Band-Aid after the other and it's not working? Because what the other side is saying, no, that's not what they're doing. They're creating all these problems which weren't there to begin with. What do you think is happening with the people that are running the show behind the scenes?
Really important question. And I believe, based on all available data, that is on track. They have lost whatever control they thought they had. And now, as the climate system frays apart and they continue these operations, it's just simply rolling an ever bigger snowball downhill, metaphorically speaking. So they are not going to let go of this weapon. Again, the covert weapon of the controllers that they have used to bring populations to their knees all over the globe for their own purposes, without those populations ever even knowing they were under assault. For the other side of the fence that is convinced that if there wasn't climate engineering, there wouldn't be a problem, again, that is absolutely not looking through a clear lens. The planet doesn't know the difference between a particulate from a geoengineering jet aircraft, an exhaust pipe, industrial smokestack. It's all a part of the problem. And we need to stop thinking dichotomously. It's this or that. You're either on the blue team or the red team. And this is what's been programmed into populations for so long, to think dichotomously. And we need to break those chains. And so, again, we have to look through a clear lens at the entire horizon. Any form of human activity that affects the energy balance of the planet or the planet's functions are a problem. So what's the thermal energy buildup right now on planet Earth? Again, climate engineering being a huge part of that, because although they can and are creating short-term toxic temporary cool downs with these light scattering particles that can blot out the sunlight, those particles trap heat at night, further exacerbating what's happening. And the triggering mechanisms, I spoke of cascading collapse. And what I'm alluding to, let me give one big example, is thawing methane deposits, thawing, releasing, and now entering the atmosphere. That's what the Bermuda Triangle scenario has been for decades. Seafloor methane deposits, as the ocean warms, and it's warming radically. As we discussed off the air, there was recently unofficial temperatures in South Florida of 100 degrees, official temperatures of 97. This is ocean temperatures. This is jacuzzi temperature for the ocean. It kills everything. So as this methane thaws on the seafloor, again, Bermuda Triangle scenario, it migrates through the water column up to the surface and then migrates into the atmosphere because it's lighter than air. And that begins to cover the planet like a layer of glass, trapping even more heat on top of climate engineering. All of these factors are part of the problem. Again, it's very complex, but yet not so much if you think about it in more simplistic terms. What's the thermal energy buildup right now on planet Earth statistically, based on the best data we have? The planet is, and which includes the oceans, of course, ocean temperatures, it's warming at the thermal energy equivalent rate of 7 Hiroshima bombs per second. The heat contained in 7 Hiroshima bombs per second. And that's conservative. And let me put this into context so people understand where much of that heat has gone up to this point into the oceans. A cubic meter of seawater can contain 4,000 times the thermal energy of a cubic meter of air. So as these oceans superheat, and they can do all the chemical ice nucleation, artificial winter weather whiplash cool downs on the surface they want. It's not going to stop the momentum of what has been created at this point. It is a very nonlinear equation. And Jean, I know you're environmentally concerned. I know you recognize, and your followers do, how miraculous life is, the web of life. We have to leave it alone. We can't begin to conceptualize or understand the intricacy of this web, and interfering with it at this level is a trajectory for near-term planetary omnicide.
So, Dane, you're using data always, data to support your points, to support your perspective, which I really appreciate. And, really hard knowledge, hard facts, which is a rare thing. Everything's emotionalized. But you come to a very grim conclusion unless, and this is the emphasis is on unless we do something about it. But you said, listen, the ecosystems on a micro and macro level are collapsing at such a rate that we are reaching, or maybe have reached, or are past a tipping point, right? There was a movie some 15, 20 years ago, I forget what it was called, but it was about a tipping point event that basically created a flash mini ice age, right? I don't know if you remember that movie. Surely a sensationalized concept, but what could, in your view, with models and also maybe looking at historic data, what could a tipping point event really produce on Earth in terms of catastrophic consequences? And how far out are we? I mean, it's hard to put a date on that, but just a guesstimate.
I'm sorry to say that it's in the rearview mirror, that we've passed the point of no return 2 to 3 decades ago. We will never know the planet we have formerly known in any time frame that matters. Does that mean we give up? Does that mean we don't fight on? Does that mean we can't salvage something? No, it doesn't mean that. It just simply means that many forms of what's been done can't just be undone in some temporary time frame. To put a context on that, if we look at past mass extinctions, in fact, methane-related mass extinctions from some of the same types of processes I've already named, going back 55 million years, the Pedum event, Paleocene, Eocene thermal maximum mass extinction of the planet, the equilibrium period after that event was about 10 to 20 million years. And what's happening now is happening exponentially faster, which makes it exponentially worse. I'm just trying to put that into context. That being said, again, the planet's life support systems are so miraculous they're beyond understanding. And if life is given any chance at all, it finds a way. But we have to provide that chance. We must provide that chance. In the scenario in the movie you mentioned, The Day After Tomorrow, that was the title of that movie.
That's the movie, yes.
That's a thermohaline current shutdown, ocean current shutdown. Now that is happening. Ocean currents are shutting down, but that result that was depicted in the movie is not going to happen. We have far too much thermal energy buildup, and the, in fact, trajectory that we are on right now is called Venus syndrome. Your listeners can research geoengineeringwatch.org Venus syndrome, and that is not a metaphor. We're literally on a trajectory that could turn this planet into a true sister to Venus in the geologic blink of an eye. Once you trigger all these feedback loops and it becomes a runaway, unstoppable event, it appears, which again, we are told based on available science, that's what likely happened on Venus. There's much we can't know. We have to rely on official data, so we can't necessarily trust such conclusions. But we can certainly say that what we see happening here is that trajectory. We're seeing nighttime lows rise twice as fast as daytime highs. And I would ask people to consider that fact. The only way that can happen is if the atmosphere is trapping more heat than it deflects. And again, that is climate engineering elements trapping that much of that heat. And that is also the buildup of heat trapping gases, not just CO2, which is more of a triggering gas, but then methane and nitrous oxide. And for example, over a 10-year time horizon, methane, and you don't see the so-called climate science community admitting to this, John. They everything they say is downplaying the severity of what's happening, not overblowing it, but downplaying it. And are they making money off it? Are there individuals making money? Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't argue that. The Al Gores, the John Kerrys, complete hypocrisy from all these people, AOC, Greenpeace, Sierra Club, all of them, total hypocrisy. But I would compare this to wars, and we have the same disaster capitalists making money off of wars. Did that mean the war didn't happen? Did that mean people didn't die? No, doesn't mean that. It just means that the disaster capitalists will try to profit off anything, even as the ship goes down, and that's what they're doing. But the bottom line is we are on a very, very grim trajectory, and that trajectory has to be changed. And John, you're not necessarily near the same type of conifer forest that we have here. I know you have forest there as well, but those that have long since ventured into forest and enjoyed the aroma, the smell of life, of the trees emitting oxygen, absorbing CO2, that is not happening now in so many regions because, again, let's go back to climate engineering. And that's not to ignore all the other problems, but because climate engineering, again, destroying the ozone layer, changing atmospheric chemistry, desiccating atmospheric relative humidity. So there's not enough humidity. Like in our forest in Northern California, there is zero forest smell. None, because the trees have shut their stomata, their respiratory ports. They're not breathing. They're not expelling oxygen. They're not absorbing CO2. They're dying, slow, protracted deaths. So I ask people to think about this, maybe things they hadn't thought of before. And how many true blue skies, John, have you seen of late? I mean,
none. Dane, none. And we've traveled this beautiful country over the last year, different places from Colorado to Florida.
yeah.
I don't see a real blue sky. I see some hazy bluish thing, but I haven't seen a deep blue sky in years.
Isn't it profound how few people even take notice of that? And if you look horizontally toward the horizon, it's even worse because you're looking through more of the particulate layer. We can't even see across our valley here on a, quote, clear day. And there's no industry here where I'm at in Northern California. There's nothing blowing across the Pacific from Asia. There's simply so much particulate matter in the air, you can't see across the valley. If you see a cumulus cloud on the distant mountains, you can barely make it out because the entire backdrop is white, a filthy, dirty looking white. And people are looking down at their iPhones and simply not looking up. And the degree of altering the planet's atmospheric chemistry and life support to that level, the threat that poses can't be overstated. And if I could weave this into one more thing, John, the threat of nuclear cataclysm, because we often state at geoengineeringwatch.org that climate intervention, aka weather warfare, is the greatest and most immediate threat we face, because it's biological warfare also, by the way. We're all breathing these particles in. That's another subject of discussion, but it is wreaking havoc in our systems. But short of nuclear cataclysm, this is the greatest threat we face. But even on the nuclear cataclysm subject, because climate engineering is destroying the Earth's protective layers of atmosphere, now we're very vulnerable to a CME, coronal mass ejection, or solar flare. And if we have a major event like the Carrington event in the 1800s, that will shut down grids all over the world. We'll have nuclear plants, hundreds of them, that can't cool themselves. Now we have Fukushima times 1, 2, 300, game over, done. Because that ionizing radiation will strip away what's left of the Earth's atmosphere, and we have a lifeless ball of rock, and that's it, game over. So again, from every conceivable direction, climate engineering, aka weather warfare, is pounding the nails into our collective coffins.
I want to emphasize something. When you say these things, you don't have a political axe to grind, because you talk to everybody, which I so appreciate. You talk to everybody who will listen and share their platform to their viewers, which I think is, amazing. And it's not like you're getting rich off of what you're doing here. This is in your blood. This is in you. This is your passion. This is your calling to bring forth this message and do everything you can. And I want to thank you for your tireless work and, just the depths to which you go. So thank you for that, Dane. I want to quickly go into the subject of unifying people around this. One of the things that we call for is today for a unity for freedom, really, because what we're all facing also as humans is a authoritarian control system that is moving in. But freedom doesn't just mean do whatever you want. It's also the responsibility to do the right things with that freedom, right? And to give the Mother Earth, to give our beautiful home the freedom to heal itself, which we are taking away from her currently. So how do we unite the TikTok kids who use a gazillion gadgets that they don't understand, have been shipped all over the world, over the oceans, with the greatest of pollution, mining minerals and whatnot, and they are virtue signaling, we need to do something, not realizing they're part of the problem, but also bring all the other people that are kind of on the conservative side of the spectrum who have always been hesitant to look at their own behavior and say, listen, we really have to change. How do we bring those people together, A, and B, complete honesty, complete unhinged. What do we need to do? What do we need to stop doing immediately?
Every form of destructive human activity must be brought to a halt, and that is a complete overturning of our current reality, and that's a pill that most don't want to swallow. And in regard to this battle, and as you mentioned in the beginning, my part in it, I have been, from the beginning of this effort for me, I've gone through my entire SEP IRA retirement account in this fight, and I'm not going to need that. Under any scenario, under the best case scenario, the reality that we face will make those types of plans that people have, the TV commercials we see, Jean, of plan for your retirement 20 years from now and this and that, and that's a moot point. There's no scenario under which that paradigm is valid anymore. It's not valid. What we now need to consider is preserving what's left of the planet's remaining life support systems, or we are done. In regard to those different demographics that you mentioned, and I fully agree, we must unite or we have no chance. The whole boat is sinking. And we have a mentality in so much of the population, and especially with some in certain circles, that feel their half of the boat isn't sinking. And so think about metaphorically, and I've seen a cartoon image that showed that. It showed a boat with the back half sinking and going under. You know how boats sink in that manner, and there's two individuals in the back of the boat that are bailing water, and the two in the front of the boat that's being elevated above the water saying, I'm sure glad our half of the boat isn't sinking. And that simply is not reality, as you know. So the bottom line is we face a common threat, all of us from every side of the fence. When this spaceship Earth fails, we're done. And the miraculousness of this planet has been so taken for granted by almost all, including the green camps, the so-called green camps. And again, their hypocrisy, I can't even begin to stomach. And we've, as I've maybe mentioned to you before, our attorneys that have worked with GeoEngineering have communicated with all the attorneys from all the major environmental groups, Greenpeace, Sierra Club, WWF, all of them. and they will not address this issue because they don't want to lose their nonprofit. How much is their nonprofit status going to matter on a dead planet? And what kind of hypocrisy is that from people who claim to care about the environment? They're interested in keeping their gravy train going, and that's it. So this comes down to us as individuals. Why are we here? What are we going to do in the time we have? And for people that feel disempowered by all this, Jean, and overwhelmed by all this, if you've seen the last 5 minutes of the dimming, and the editor that put that together was various statements I made from my broadcasts over the years, and he was an absolute godsend that came out of nowhere and helped us to finish that film. But that message I tried to convey in the final 5-minute epilogue of that film is as simple as this: that any one of us, as I stated, could be the last pebble to trigger the landslide of awakening. And if we can do that, if our collective efforts can do that, if we can expose the epitome of human insanity, which is to engineer the Earth's life support systems and use them as a weapon, if we can expose that, we would cause a shockwave around the world, John, and we would take a quantum leap in the right direction, and that's worth fighting for. And to do this the right way, people need to learn how to effectively and efficiently fight in this battle. And we have a link. If they search the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org, they can get specific instructions. We're playing chess. We need to learn how to play well. And if each of us wakes those around us and they do the same, we will bring this issue to light. And we can take that leap in the right direction. But that will take all of us. And fighting effectively and efficiently is important. And let me give one example. It's much more effective and efficient to pass on extremely shocking images, satellite images of what can only be seen as weather warfare, square clouds, blanket spraying of continents. Passing on an image like that is exponentially more effective at waking someone up to this issue than just going out in the street and pointing at the sky and ranting. So we're saying, again, we're playing chess. We need to learn how to play well, and this battle will take all of us.
Dane Wigington, I couldn't agree more. And I'm always, here's one thing: when somebody speaks from truth, from spirit, like you do, then the message always translates, always. And this is what truth does. Truth resonates, and truth resonates when you speak, Dane. Thank you for all of that. What is the best way for people to learn more about it, to learn more about your work, to watch the dimming, and maybe you're on social media as well? What links should we share with the people?
Again, the dimming, as you mentioned, is a very thorough examination. In regard to the fires, one of our most important reports is Wildfires Serve Geoengineering Agenda. Very short, but very important report that has screenshots of the science study from the so-called scientists advocating for the burning of northern latitude forests to put enough particulate matter in the atmosphere to provide temporary cooling. Is that not the epitome of insanity? And we try to also offer for conversation starters. Many people are a bit cautious about just introducing an issue, and we try to have conversation starters available on our site as well. We have shirts that have an image of the Earth with a tanker descending down over it, dispersing, and stop climate engineering, investigate geoengineeringwatch.org. We try to provide methods and means of people to start that conversation. And when you can start the conversation, you can get your foot in the door. You can open up the issue and bring it to light without just hitting someone with it out of the blue. And so we're trying to provide those tools so people can help to make this equation exponential in the right direction. And that I know you have heard the math behind this before. If one person tells two the first day of a 30-day month, and those two more each, and that's into the millions by the end of 30 days. We could do that if we worked together. And again, once we expose this, so many wheels will turn on their own, because so many people in high places will realize that they are going down with the ship as well, that their part of the ship is also going down. And it's because of this effort in raising that critical mass of awareness that now we're communicating with people in quite high positions. I'm communicating with a former Senate Armed Services Committee member. I think you said you saw my recent exchange. Robert Kennedy asked me to discuss this issue with him, which I did. And now we're reaching higher and higher circles. And once we do that, again, so many wheels in the battle will turn on their own as all these individuals realize what they thought would be won't. And that they are literally fighting for their lives now and their children's lives. And they join the battle then. And now we have a tidal wave. And that's the reaction we need to trigger, and collectively we could do it, John.
While you were speaking, I was looking for a quote by Robert Kennedy Jr. And as I said, you have no political axe to grind because you talk to everyone. Mm-hmm. I love that. But he said something to the effect of, we have to realize that we are a part of nature, not apart from it, but we are a part of nature. And we need to reconnect with that oneness, that we're connected to all things. And only that connection will bring us to those realizations. Dane, as dire and as alarming as the situation is, there's a lot of, when we have those off-camera conversations and you share a lot about what you observe in nature, the extreme resilience, the amazing ability of every living organism to eventually heal itself. There is hope. And the hope is that we take the pressure off and allow for these systems to do what they need to do, much like in the human body. It's the same with the ecosystem. I want to thank you so much for your amazing work. Go to geoengineeringwatch.org, please. Check out everything there is to see, learn, watch, share. Follow those instructions, the activist instructions. They work really well. Dane, thank you once again for your time today.
Thank you, Jean. And to share in a snapshot, if I may, when I feel fatigued, and many of us do, understandably feel very fatigued. And I think at that point must re-examine why we are here. What is our part in the play? And as you so correctly just stated, man's war against nature is a war against ourselves. And I think about specific moments when I feel I don't want to go on or can't after 20 years of nonstop slogging this battle. And when I'm trekking through the forest, and I may have shared this moment before, but I remember one time specifically when I trekked through an area that there used to be a chorus of frogs singing always. And I heard one sole survivor that could barely croak, but he was not giving up. He was continuing to play his part in this drama. And that so moved me to the marrow. And when those moments happen, as long as he's willing to fight, I will never, ever give up. So long as any part of this thread of life fights to hang on, it's up to all of us to fight with these organisms, these miraculous life forms of which we're a part. And we need to remember that. And if we reprioritize that, that's what life's about. It's not about material acquisition. It's not about taking the Disneyland vacation or the Caribbean cruise. It's about defending this miracle of Earth and life and all the various life forms. If we reprioritize, that has meaning that can't be taken away, and our will can never be taken away, never. We need to remember that. We're not powerless, and those behind all this are not gods. We can make a difference if we simply begin this journey of 1,000 miles, a single step.
Amen. Amen. Dane Wigington, thank you again for these heartfelt words. Inspired Tribe, thank you so much for watching. Listen, save this, come back to this. Whenever you need it, watch it, listen. We need to focus. We need to prioritize, as Dane said. We love you all. We appreciate you. We'll be back with you again very, very soon. Hey, John Nolan here. I'm so excited to share my new song, Faith in Me, with you. It's about the journey so many of us are on in these times. Go to johnnolan.bandcamp.com to listen or click on the link down below.